to another podcast with Investing Education Academy. Today, Leon and I will be talking to you all about how electric vehicles are getting supercharged. And it may not be what you think it is. You got to stick around to find out. Before we dive in, if you have invested in any EVs, if you have been thinking about investing in an EV, if you are driving an EV, if you've been thinking about purchasing an EV, this is something you want to listen to. It's going to be a lot of good information. And of course, we want to say hi to all of our community members. Really appreciate you all sending the messages and texts. We've received them. Some of you all, let me say right now, we have not called you back. We will. We're working through a list. Give us some time and we will get to you. We haven't forgotten, and it's not as if we didn't receive it. So we will get back to you. For the new members, Investing Education Academy, welcome. And we have members joining, I think, today or yesterday. Welcome to Investing Education Academy. We look forward to seeing you inside of the community. And for anyone else who wants to join, please, our memberships start anywhere from $17.99 a month up to $5,000 a year, depending on what you want to do with this. And the membership level that's $5,000 a year will be $10,000 by the end of this year. So if you want to lock in that $5,000 a year membership rate, I suggest you do it now. We invest together. We do international deals. We do domestic deals. And then we also have people pitch to us. With that being said, we also have a lot of fun. So today, Let's talk about your money and how you invest. Why do we choose the topic, Leon, about electric vehicles getting supercharged? And I'm going to go do some housekeeping.
Yeah, so chose this topic today because electric vehicles, or may also say EVs, they're essentially a new product category, right? So like we're always looking for either new investments or investments that are growing. EVs are a legit new product category. Now it's very small, which is great. So we all get to get in on the bottom floor, but it is a new product category. So one thing we talked about before is that there are many countries around the world that are mandating that a certain number of EVs are sold. A certain number of percentage of cars that are sold are EVs in certain countries. Also, here in the United States, certain states have mandated that too. I believe California is the leading one. Can't remember by what year, but in the next couple of years,
I think 2024.
No, I think it's that one. I think it's
Did they have to start selling all EVs?
No, all new car sales have to be EVs.
Yeah, I think it's 24, 25. It's very soon.
Okay. Well, relatively soon in California, all new car sales will have to be EVs, right? So that's great. But that's only California. And so what's happening nationally is that today the Biden administration came out with a new policy. Well, they're proposing a new policy where that will mandate, essentially, well, not a mandate, but essentially what will happen is their goal is by 2032 to have 67% of all new car sales be electric vehicles. And they're not doing it by volume. They're doing it by the amount of emissions that come out of the tailpipe. So they've gotten really granular with this. So they're basically on pollution, right? So cars can only spit out a certain amount of pollution between now and 2030 by a certain amount. I think the number, I remember seeing the number is 0.0. It's either 0.0, it's either 0.001 or 0.01. And I don't know the technical term, but right now I think we're in like the 0.2s in that range. I think 2025 is 0.25. And I think by 2030, it has to go down to 0.01, somewhere in that range. So huge difference, right? So basically, essentially, the tailpipe cannot produce really any emissions, new car sales by 2032. Well, sorry, they want 67% of new car sales to basically be emission free by 2032. Now to kind of give a comparison, right now, the number of EVs on the road right now is only 6%. That's actually roughly doubled in the last year and a half. Because I remember when we really started covering EVs here, it was around 2 to 3%. So now we're up to 6% last year in 2022. So EV sales.
Leon, let me jump in. So I was talking about the fun stuff, right? So Leon and I just had a quick little joust about the fact that, if you all have noticed, Lucid has started marketing pretty heavily. And you start to hear more talk about Rivians. You're just starting to hear more talk about other EV car plays. greater than the Teslas or, looking at Ford. Ford has really been hitting it hard in regards to releasing EVs, but all the car companies are working on them. Like all the car companies are working on them. And Leon and I were joking that there's only 3 major car companies roughly. There are more, but some of the car companies that you all think are independent are owned by, Volkswagen. Like Volkswagen owns Bugatti. They own
They own
Audi.
all. I think they own Audi. Yeah, Lamborghini, Audi. Yeah, all that.
All those. And you think all these are separate brands, but they're all under these bigger umbrellas. Hyundai, they own a large number of really in the Asian market, but it's a number of brands that they own. Anyway, the point is this: with all these EV companies that are out right now, Leon joked that somebody has to fail. It was a brutal but honest thought, and we said it right before we started the live, and this is not what we planned on bringing up. So I just want to keep this isolated. But when he said it, it kind of is true. When you look at, he likened it to the computer companies. You think it's a million brands of computers out there. Really, it's like 2. They own different brands. So I am curious to say, with this infusion of money into, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Bill, and with what they're doing with emissions, and even looking at, Build America, Buy America, what's going to happen to these car companies? It's somebody has to either die or get acquired. I wonder who it's going to be.
Yep, so the example I used was in the 80s, right? In the 80s, there were like 20 computer companies. Dell, Gateway, remember Gateway, the looked like the cow showing our age. Digital Computer. There were tons. There were tons of computer companies. And now today we really have like HP, I think Lenovo. There's only like a handful of computer companies now, right? Most of the computer companies from the 80s failed because the market can only support so much. So right now, and then with the car companies, right? The major car companies in the United States are GM and Ford. And like Brent said, Volkswagen owns a lot of names too. But really we have a handful of car companies, right? So now with these EVs, you have these new startups that are trying to, test the market. And in my opinion, I actually heard a number the other day saying that Lucid is having the most trouble because their car price is just too high. It starts too high. Rivian, I heard, is going to need an influx of cash probably over the next 6 to 12 months. So those 2 recent startups right there may not be around, in a couple of years, right? So so the EV market, while it's ripe, like right now, we're on the bottom floor, right? Anybody who gets in now, for the ones that survive, will do well in the future. And so like Brent said, him and I were just discussing before we came on, and I'd said, that some of them are going to fail, right? And ultimately, GM and Ford and Volkswagen, they will be around because they have billions of dollars of revenue, $100 million in profits, whereas the Rivians and the Lucids of the world are non-profitable, and revenues are not growing that much because, again, there's so much competition.
And margins on cars still isn't that much, for those people. It's really the money that most car companies make is on servicing the vehicles after it's sold. And Arbery just said energy pundits say this is not sustainable. Energy within itself, to change the energy infrastructure of a country, it takes almost a lifetime. Honestly, you cannot just. We still see 67 Chevys on the road, and people love them. They fix them up. They're classic cars. You still see the cars from the 70s. You still see a lot of cars on the road that were quality cars. So it's not as if you're going to snap your fingers and all of a sudden everything's an EV. That's impossible. However, it is true that from a sustainability standpoint, they're going to have to figure out how to sustainably mine, looking for all this nickel and, the parts required to build these cars. How do you recycle them? We have to figure out how do we number one, service them on a regular basis? How do we recycle the materials once they get done? And how do we switch over leaving fossil fuel? You're not just going to leave fossil fuel. So it's, you got to dig the tanks out the ground. You have to now, you should do a contamination clean afterwards. It's just a whole lot that goes into stopping fossil fuel from being a primary energy source. So, I would agree with you, Aubrey.
Yeah, and
Let me see. It was one other,
also he was also saying how Biden
but
Biden is kind of backtracking on his statement. Probably so. I mean, this is what Biden put out today is very ambitious, and a lot of people actually think that really what it is a starting point, right? They think they'll probably get lawsuits, they'll probably get pushback, so they'll probably have to lower it. But they went so hard with it that when they do lower the amount of emissions, it'll still be a lot of reduction because they started with a whole high number. So we'll see. But okay, so now that's the opportunity. Now, where can we actually find these opportunities? So I've identified three areas. The EV car makers, like we said, Volkswagen, GM, Ford, Rivian, Lucid, Tesla, of course. Like the other area is the charging stations, and the last one is the batteries, right? So all three of those those are three major. And also, there's actually a fourth one, which is semiconductors. There are actually some semiconductor companies that a lot of people don't even know about that over 50 between 40 to 60% of their revenue comes just from the EV market. And if you don't know these stocks, they have done very well the last. They've actually been close to the performance of something like an Nvidia, but in the car market. So the areas of opportunity are EV makers themselves, the car makers themselves, charging stations, batteries, and then semiconductors. And
oh,
mhm.
Leon. So for those of you all who are listening to this right now and you're thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna buy the new car companies versus the older ones that seem to be moving slowly," buyer beware, because in the end, revenue is going to be needed to sustain these companies, and many of them may have be sexy, they may have good introduction, but they don't have a very strong business model to help them weather the storms. So if I were going to play this, and I'm only putting curious money in the companies like the Rivians, the Lucids, and I'm putting most of my funds in the Fords, the GMs, because I think Volkswagen is definitely making a pretty strong play in the market. But I'm not putting investable funds into those new companies.
Yeah, and just Aubrey also said which is pretty toxic in those. Yes, Aubrey's saying a lot of the things like the batteries and some of the baseline products for these EVs are made from dirty sources. And you're right. I mean, to go mine lithium and nickel that's needed, those are mines, right? Those can cause deaths. Their mines are very dirty. They're actually pollutants. So electric vehicles aren't 100% like carbon neutral like everyone thinks they are. There are some dirty components to it, like fossil fuels. So, but like Brent said, I am also looking to. So Brent and I have this phrase we call ecosystem investing. It's where we invest around the major product. The major product here being EVs, but the ecosystem around it would be the charging stations, the batteries, the semiconductors, things like that. Because the reason why, right, is let's say, like I said, Rivian and Lucid may not make it, right? But in the meantime, they still have to buy semiconductors. They still have to buy nickel and lithium for the batteries. They still have to buy the components. Um, and that's gonna the companies that sell those are gonna do well. Even if Rivian fails, if Lucid fails, in the meantime they still have to buy these products. So the analogy is going back to the old days where they said back in the day when people would mine for gold, it wasn't the people who mined for gold who made the money. It was the people that sold them picks and the shovels and the axes. Because no matter who found gold or not, everybody needed a pick, an axe, and a shovel to go mine that gold. So that's what Brent and I kind of call ecosystem investing, where we're looking for the picks and the shovels around the major products. Because no matter who survives, we don't care who wins or loses. Everyone needs to buy chips. They need to buy batteries, nickel, lithium, and charging stations are going to be built regardless because of this. So, and speaking of that, our two picks today, we're going to put inside the membership community are going to be around the ecosystem of the market and not the car companies themselves. And members inside the membership community will be able to see those picks tomorrow morning.
Yep. And trust me, they may not be what you think they're going to be.
Right.
So, with that, is there anything else, Leon?
Let me see. Here's my notes. So yeah, last thing is Biden's goal is to cut greenhouse gases in the U.S. by 50% by 2030. So again, that's why this thing is so aggressive. Will it happen? We have no idea, but he's really, really pushing for it. And by him pushing for it, it's going to make this EV market mature a lot faster than it would without this regulation. So it's a huge buying opportunity for all of us. We're getting in on the ground floor of essentially a new product, new category. So definitely put some money to work in this area.
Yeah, and this is for me. I think it's going to be some pushback from how aggressively
Almost
they're going
definitely.
after.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
I think it's going to be some serious pushback, and also too, even if everything went through, it still takes time to put all the pieces in place. So, looking at the picks and shovels, we would liken it to what Standard Oil did. The time the Rockefellers noticed this whole gold rush, oil rush, they say, we're out of that business of searching for oil. We're going to build the refineries.
Mhm.
So we don't care who wins. They have to come through us. That's how Leon and I think I can speak for him in saying you should really look at this industry, this emerging market, because the difference is this is an emerging market that is growing into like a staple of the US, which is cars. So it's an emerging sector that's already going into an established marketplace. So it's not just a completely new thing. And with that being said, I don't want to invest a lot of money, anything beyond curious money, in the young gunslingers.
Right. Yeah, I'm not messing with the loose and the Rivians. I'm messing. If I would do anything, it'd be Tesla, GM, Ford, or Volkswagen as the cars, and then ecosystem. I would look more kind of the chips and like the all three, the chips, the chargers, and the batteries as the ecosystem investing. And like I said, some of those will
Yeah,
be our picks this evening that community members will see.
yeah, and even what Leon said about the Chargers, you're talking about the U.S. in, committing about 6.5, basically $7 billion to building out these charge stations throughout the United States. That's a significant amount of money, and you're not gonna. I don't care, even if there is pushback, even if that just comes in at half. You're talking $3 billion.
Right. And
You're not gonna put.
oh, sorry. And I just heard that Walmart. I'm pretty sure. I believe Walmart is going to be installing charging stations at some of their stores. I believe. So private industry.
Everybody
Yeah.
is
Right. Yeah.
Starbucks, 7-Eleven, all these shops, because with this new infrastructure bill, they get tax incentives for putting these EVs on their property. So it's even Tesla. They're talking about Tesla is going to change the way they arrange their charging stations to now have universal adapters so any car can charge, because it has to be a certain percentage of charge stations at any charge location that have universal ports in order to qualify for funds from this infrastructure bill.
Yep.
So, a lot of companies with land, a lot of businesses that have land this unused will be submitting their applications to get charge stations put in, because the tax incentives are going to be well worth it, in addition to a possible small revenue source for them. So it'll be interesting to see how it is. These things pop up, and you don't need the build out like you do with a traditional gas station, right?
Right.
A traditional gas station, you have to dig the whole thing out, put in like tanks, new piping. Now you're talking about an above ground infrastructure that's relatively easy to set up.
Yep. So regarding this topic, look at the ecosystem around the EVs, not just the car companies themselves, because as we said, some of them will fail. Of course, the big boys will probably still be around, but regardless, all of them have to buy chips, batteries, and the like. So definitely look into those. We'll be profiling quite a few of those going forward inside the membership.
Yep. Everybody, thank you for being with us, and we will see you in 2 weeks. And if you listen to the podcast, thank you for listening to the podcast. We're up to 1,500 unique downloads per month, and I remember when it was 2. So that is definitely an improvement. Yeah, we're looking to grow. So